You don't have bad habits. You are your bad habits. And you don't have good habits either. You are those too. Every action you repeat enough times stops being something you do and becomes something you are. The person who runs every morning doesn't run because they're disciplined. They run because they've become someone who runs. The person who avoids hard conversations doesn't do it because they're lazy. They've become someone who avoids. Your habits aren't behaviors you choose in the moment. They're the person you've been building, one repeated action at a time for years. The Stoics understood this with a precision that modern behavioral science spent 2,000 years catching up to. And they built a complete system for constructing identity through action, not through motivation, not through willpower, not through inspiration, through repetition, so deliberate and so structured that eventually the action disappeared and only the character remained.
If you want to understand exactly how the Stoics built habits that produced unbreakable character and how to apply the same system today, subscribe and hit the bell, because after this video we're covering the 4 Stoic Virtues, the specific qualities the Stoics were building toward with every habit they practiced. But first, how the Stoics actually built who they were.
The Stoic understanding of habit begins with a concept that Epictetus called the ruling faculty. In Greek, hegemonikon. This is the part of your mind that governs everything else. Your judgments, your desires, your responses, your character. Epictetus taught in the Discourses, recorded by his student Aurelius around 108 AD, that the ruling faculty is not fixed. It's not something you're born with in its final form. It's something you shape, deliberately, through what you repeatedly do and what you repeatedly think. Every action you take, every judgment you make, every response you choose, these don't just produce an outcome in the world. They leave a trace in the ruling faculty. They make the next similar action slightly easier or slightly harder. Enough repetitions in one direction, and the ruling faculty becomes a different thing than it was before. This is the Stoic theory of habit formation at its foundation. You are not building behaviors, you are reshaping the faculty that governs all behavior. Change that, and everything changes.
Marcus Aurelius returned to this idea constantly throughout Meditations, written during the last decade of his reign, around 1780 AD. He wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, not its intentions, not its desires, its thoughts, meaning the actual repeated content of your mental life day after day." He also wrote that it's possible to ruin your mind, the ruling faculty, just as you can ruin your body through neglect and through feeding it the wrong things repeatedly. This wasn't a metaphor for Marcus. It was a technical observation about how character actually forms. The wrong thoughts repeated become the wrong judgments. The wrong judgments repeated become the wrong responses. The wrong responses repeated become the wrong person. The process works in reverse too. The right actions repeated become the right character, regardless of whether you feel inspired to perform them in the moment.
This brings us to the concept that Epictetus called Askesis. The word is Greek, and it means training or exercise, the same root that gives us the English word ascetic. But where modern usage associates asceticism with deprivation for its own sake, Epictetus used askesis to describe something more specific and more purposeful. Deliberate practice under controlled conditions, designed to build specific capacities in the ruling faculty. The Stoics train their minds the way an athlete trains their body, not randomly, not by accident, not by waiting to feel motivated, but through structured repetition of specific actions at specific times for specific reasons. Musonius Rufus, the Roman Stoic philosopher who was Epictetus' own teacher, wrote in his lectures around 70 AD that practice is more important than theory. For precisely this reason, the theoretical understanding of what virtue is does absolutely nothing to your character. Only the repeated practice of virtuous action changes who you actually are. You can understand courage completely and still be a coward, because understanding and being are built by different processes. Understanding comes from thinking. Being comes from doing repeatedly.
The most structured habit practice the Stoics developed was what they called the daily review, and they built it into both ends of the day with deliberate precision. Epictetus described the morning component in the Discourses. Before engaging with the day, you examine what the day will require of your character. Not what you need to accomplish externally, what you will need to be internally. What temptations toward anger will you likely face? What situations will test your patience? Where will you be tempted to say something dishonest, to avoid discomfort? The morning review is not planning, it's character preparation, priming the ruling faculty with the right orientation before events can catch it unprepared. A person who has thought carefully about how they want to respond to provocation before provocation arrives responds differently than one who encounters it cold. Not because their willpower in the moment is stronger, because their mind arrived at the moment already pointed in the right direction.
Seneca developed the evening review into an even more rigorous practice. In his letters to Lucilius, written in 65 AD during the final year of his life before his forced suicide under Nero, he described examining the whole of each day before sleeping, going back over everything he had said and done, hiding nothing from himself, passing nothing by. He asked himself 3 specific questions every evening. What bad habit did I cure today? What fault did I resist? In what respect am I better today than I was yesterday? Notice what he's not asking. He's not asking whether he completed his task list. He's not asking whether the outcomes of the day were good. He's asking about character, specifically about the trajectory of his character. Not where am I today, but am I moving in the right direction? The evening review is not self-punishment. It's the honest audit that makes the morning preparation meaningful, because without honest accounting of where you actually fell short, you don't know what needs to be practiced tomorrow. Marcus Aurelius described the combined effect of these two practices in Meditations with a single sentence that functions as the core mechanism of Stoic habit formation. Do not indulge in dreams of what you lack, but count up the chief of the blessings you possess, and then thankfully remember how eagerly you would have craved them if they had not been yours. This is not gratitude practice in the soft modern sense. It's a daily recalibration of judgment, training the ruling faculty to evaluate your actual life against the actual alternatives, rather than against some imagined perfect version. Repeated enough times, this recalibration becomes automatic. You stop experiencing what you have as insufficient by default, not because you've convinced yourself it's enough, but because you've trained your judgment to assess it accurately. The third core Stoic habit practice was voluntary discomfort, and this is where their approach separates most clearly from everything that calls itself habit building today. Modern habit systems are almost entirely oriented toward making behavior easier. Remove friction from the good habit, increase friction for the bad one. Make it convenient, make it automatic, make it effortless. The Stoics understood the value of all of this, but they also understood something modern habit science has only recently begun to acknowledge, that a character built entirely on ease is brittle. When the friction appears anyway, when life makes the right action hard, a person who has only ever practiced it when it was easy has no reserves. The Stoics deliberately practiced the right actions under uncomfortable conditions so that discomfort itself could not derail the habit. Seneca slept on hard surfaces periodically. He fasted. He wore rough clothing. He ate plain food, not to harm himself, to prove to himself, repeatedly, that comfort was not required for virtue. The habit needed to be practiced in good conditions and bad conditions until the conditions became irrelevant to the practice. This principle extended to what Epictetus called the practice of desire and aversion, training yourself to want the right things and to avoid the wrong things at the level of automatic response, not deliberate choice. He was clear in the Enchiridion that this takes time and consistent practice to the point of what we would now recognize as behavioral automaticity. You begin by choosing your desires deliberately, because choosing them requires effort. You practice choosing them consistently, even when the effort is significant. Over time, the choice becomes easier. Eventually, it becomes the default. You find yourself naturally oriented toward what is genuinely good. Not because you're making a heroic choice in the moment, but because you've practiced the choice enough times that it has become part of who you are. The habit is complete when the effort disappears and only the character remains. Here is what all of this produces in practice, and it's important to understand why it's different from what most habit systems promise. The Stoics were not building habits to improve their performance metrics. They were not tracking their morning routines to optimize productivity. They were building a self, a consistent, recognizable, reliable identity that remained functional under the full range of conditions life actually produces, including the conditions where every modern habit system breaks down: genuine adversity, sustained pressure, repeated failure, and the slow erosion of motivation over time. Marcus Aurelius maintained his philosophical practice under plague, war, political betrayal, and the deaths of children. Seneca maintained his under Nero's increasingly dangerous paranoia, right up to the point of being ordered to take his own life. Epictetus maintained his as a physical slave, whose body was subject to his master's violence. None of these were conditions that a habit system oriented around making good behavior easy was ever going to handle. They required a different kind of habit, one built into the identity so deeply that adversity couldn't reach it. There's one final element of Stoic habit building that most people overlook entirely, and it may be the most important one. Epictetus taught that the most critical habit is the habit of attention, what he called prosoche in Greek. The practice of watching your own mind, noticing your judgments as they form, catching your responses before they become automatic in the wrong direction. Before you can deliberately shape your ruling faculty, you have to be able to see what it's actually doing. Most people have almost no capacity for this. Their thoughts and emotions and responses arise and pass completely unexamined, which means the ruling faculty is being shaped by repetition, but not by deliberate repetition. Random experience is building your character whether you intend it to or not. The practice of attention is what makes the difference between having your character shaped by accident and having it shaped by design. Epictetus described this as the foundation under all other Stoic practice. Without the habit of attention, everything else is guesswork. With it, you have what you need to build exactly the person you actually intend to be. Your habits are who you are, not who you intend to be, not who you were. Who you are right now is the accumulated result of everything you've done repeatedly up to this moment. The question isn't whether your habits are shaping your identity. They are, continuously, whether you're paying attention or not. The question is whether you're shaping your habits with the same deliberateness the Stoics brought to theirs, or whether you're leaving the construction of your own character to accident and convenience.
If this video changed how you see the relationship between what you repeatedly do and who you actually are, good. Subscribe and hit the bell. Next week we're covering the 4 Stoic virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. The specific character qualities the Stoics were building toward with every practice, every morning review, every chosen discomfort. Because understanding how to build Stoic habits requires understanding exactly what you're trying to build toward. See the game, control the game,